Story 1. This may take a while to relate, but a lot happened. I was working as a warehouse manager for a pharmaceutical cosmetic company. Our premises were part of a large industrial complex that had been walled off into 3 smaller buildings occupied by 3 different businesses. My office was a freestanding building inside the warehouse about the size of a shipping container. My company was in the process of redeveloping the insides of the warehouse, so my office had to go. My immediate boss was the operations manager, and he came to me one morning, telling me to demolish my office by the end of the day. We had tools, but only hammers and spanners, etc. Nothing really suited for the task at hand. When I asked how he expected me to do it, he said, "Just drive a forklift through it." To this day, I am not sure if he was joking, being sarcastic, or actually meant it. But it had been said in front of 4 witnesses. Like most grown men with the inner workings of a 5-year-old, I love chaos and destruction, so I chose to take advantage of the situation. I would love to say I rammed the office at full speed like the Dukes of Hazzard on a sugar rush, but I figured that might be too extreme. What I did was push the walls in slowly before lifting off the roof panels. All was going well. I got called away to another part of the warehouse, and another worker decided to take up where I left off. He started lifting a roof panel off when there was a loud noise, a cross between a bang and a popping cork. This is the point where we realized that one of the pipes for the fire sprinkler system ran through the office roof, and it had been completely ripped out. The pressure in the system caused an initial spray of water before a torrent spewed forth at roof height. The water had been in the pipes for at least 20 years, and combined with the dirt in the rafters, it was like it was raining squid ink. It covered the finished goods, the raw materials, the workers, and the equipment. The production line was immediately shut down, and everyone was panicking. We had a plumber on site who was unable to stop the flow. It had been flowing for about 5 minutes when we heard the sirens. The fire system had automatically alerted the fire department when the water pressure dropped. Due to the nature of our business, we had on site up to 30,000 liters of pure alcohol and ethanol. So when the firemen came, they came prepared for the worst. 3 trucks and about 20 firemen arrived. The firemen went to turn the water off, but the valves were in one of the other warehouses. One was occupied by a heating company, the other by a Christian food drive. The heating company had knocked off early, and the Christian place was occupied sporadically. Firefighters had to break down the doors of these businesses until they found and shut off the water. The firemen weren't happy with the situation, and here in Australia, if you are responsible for a false alarm, you get fined potentially thousands of dollars for wasting their time. The damage bill was going to be massive in terms of fines, ruined stock and materials, and lost time. It all happened so fast that not much had been said, but once the situation was under control, the operations manager was looking for answers. He approached me, asking what on earth I had done. At this point, I informed him that it was not me, as I was elsewhere at the time, and that, for the record, he had instructed me to drive a forklift through a building. He turned pale as the reality of his own culpability sank in. The end result was that the worker operating the fork at the time was deemed responsible. I think they needed an official scapegoat for an insurance claim, but no official record was made, and no punishment was handed out. It was all swept under the table and never mentioned again. Story 2. My husband is a truck driver in the woods. He loads up the logs on the trailer in the woods and then drives to the wood mill to deliver. My husband worked for a small company where the owner is so hands-off it doesn't make any sense. His famous last words were, "Do the best you can." Hubby had some trailer issues, so he unloaded and called his boss to let him know he was going to need someone to come and remove his trailer stakes so he could drive down the road to bring the trailer to get fixed. His boss told him that he was not paying someone to come and remove the stakes. Now, let me explain the trailer my husband used. It was 12 feet wide, and the stakes were 14 feet high. This was a massive trailer used for off-road use. You're not supposed to drive on the main roads with it. The boss just told him to drive the darn thing to the shop. So hubby mentioned the electric lines and the telephone lines. The boss said, "You'll be fine, you won't touch the lines. Just get it to the shop." His boss has never driven a truck, he just owns them and expects everyone to take care of themselves when there's a breakdown. So hubby said fine but warned him not to blame him if everyone loses electricity, including himself. So hubby left the woodyard and started driving to the shop. It was about a 2-hour drive to get from the woodyard to the shop. Before hubby left, he warned me that we would most likely lose power. I was like, oh, okay. I was planning on going grocery shopping anyway. So hubby drove by our house. We still had power. About 10 minutes later, the power went out. So I decided I was going to go to town. On my way to town, the power lines were down in front of our old principal's house. He was outside trying to direct traffic and was trying to figure out who the guy was that was driving the pink maroon truck. We both disliked this man. He should not have been allowed to work with children and teenagers. He used to tell my husband that he would never amount to anything by looking out a window. So I stopped, and the old principal was trying to explain that a truck hit the lines, and he was trying to figure out who it was. So I looked at him dead in the face and told him it was one of the students that would never amount to anything just looking out a window, and I just drove on. The shop was on my way to town, and I decided to stop in and see if hubby and the guys needed coffee. His boss was there yelling at hubby because his wife had no power and couldn't go on Facebook, so I watched hubby get scolded. Then my husband pulled out his phone, showing that the boss told him to drive down and to do the best he could. The boss shut up for a moment and let hubby fix his trailer. The utility companies came and repaired and figured out who the truck belonged to. The boss got a bill for over $150,000 to repair the down lines and broken poles. The reason I know how much the bill was is because he left it on the counter in the office, and I saw it when I went to collect my husband's last check because he was done with the boss's nonsense. My husband was the only driver that he had who would make him money, and hubby always drove the vehicles nobody else wanted to drive. Story 3. Not as extreme as some stories here, but I was still pretty happy with the result. I share a house with 3 roommates, all girls. To keep things neat, we have a rolling cleaning schedule, and the agreement is that each week we clean one part of the house according to said schedule. I'm the one that stays most weekends while the others tend to go home, so while they fret to do their bit of cleaning on Friday afternoon, I usually chill and do it whenever I feel like it on the weekend, as long as it's done by Monday. One weekend, one of my roommates didn't go home and was having her boyfriend over. So Friday afternoon rolls in, I invite a friend to spend the weekend, and we're watching a movie on the couch around 6 p.m. Roommate walks into the living room and tells me I need to clean the bathroom. Me. I'll do it tomorrow as I have a friend over and we're busy. She insists that she wants it clean for when her boyfriend arrives in an hour. Me. If you want it clean before I get to it, you can go clean it. I'll do it tomorrow when I'm not watching a movie with a friend. Her. No, you need to do it now. I waited until our movie was finished. Roommate kept staring at me while she had dinner with her boyfriend. I waited until they went to her room around 11 p.m. And then I pulled out all the cleaning supplies and took over the bathroom. I played loud music and dropped an absurd amount of bottles and empty buckets to make noise. Hit the vacuum cleaner against the radiator pipes. It's attached to the wall between her room and the bathroom. Vacuumed for ages. Then decided to also vacuum the hallway. And there seemed to be a pesky amount of dust right in front of her door. How weird. Then went back to mop and did the same. I poured pipe cleaner down the shower drain and put up a sign that the shower was out of order for 24 hours to let it sink in. I cleaned the mirror with a product I knew leaves streaks all over. The next day, my roommate was super mad. She couldn't shower after spending time with her boyfriend because of the pipe cleaner. She couldn't use the bathroom but also couldn't say I hadn't cleaned it. She was furious. I had a good laugh with my friend, and my roommate never gave me grief about cleaning on Fridays again. Edit. The schedule doesn't say when to clean. It assigns a task to each person per week. The idea is that things must be cleaned by the time everyone's back for the week on Sunday night. If someone leaves for a longer weekend, they can clean on Wednesday even though it gets dirty again by the weekend. As long as it's done roughly in the second half of the week, there never was a problem. Story 4. By request, this is a retail hell story. The background: I used to work for a company that manufactured custom window dressings. As is the nature with many custom products, you better make sure you have all the specifications correct before you begin production, because if you don't, then you'll have to start over again and consign to the dumpster the incorrect parts that have already been made. When I first started, I was assigned to the regional training store. Now, however hellish it was, everyone who came out of that store was better trained than anyone else in the district. The training that happened in the other stores wasn't bad, per se. We were held to the highest standards so that we could go forth and train new hires in acceptable standards. Time passes, and I am eventually transferred to a backwater store working with 2 women as well trained as I was. I worked there for a few years, and we got to know each other's styles and shorthands. We worked to acceptable standards because, frankly, that's all that was necessary. But we still managed to have the lowest average error rate in the district. And we always double-checked each other's work before sending the orders to production. The setup: enter Hotshot. Hotshot was a young woman transferred to our store. We were a low-volume, self-sufficient store, so it was a bit unusual, but not impossible, for us to be sent a 4th person. Well, Hotshot came in like she owned the place. According to her, she was on the fast track to management, and she'd been sent to our store as an opportunity to cut her teeth as a supervisor, specifically because our store had been run so well for years without a manager. The 3 of us shrugged. We didn't really care, for the same exact reason. All Hotshot had to do was not screw up. The compliance. At some point during the first week, Hotshot questioned the quality of our double-checking. I want us all to adhere to the highest standards when double-checking each other's work. I exchanged glances with the other 2 women. Well, usually we just go along to get along. Hotshot: No. Hold me to the highest standards when checking work. I need to understand how you all operate. The compliance and fallout. Later that day, I'm double-checking my coworker's orders, per usual, and I come across one of Hotshot's orders. I start checking her work, and I bet you can't guess, dear reader, who was only trained in acceptable standards. And her work was okay as far as acceptable standards went, but not as far as the company's highest standards. I stopped counting the number of errors I found after I hit a dozen. Hotshot noticed what I was doing and, shocked and indignant, snatched the paperwork out of my hands and told me I was never to check her work again. The epilogue: Hotshot was loud, bossy, and a troublemaker. All 3 of us complained individually to her boss about this. Eventually, it came out that Hotshot being sent to our store wasn't her opportunity to shine. It was her last chance to keep her job. She didn't last long. Years later, I learned she did, finally, manage to get her act together, though. Story 5. Another one from my dad. Like I said, my dad was a group leader, and sometimes they had a midnight shift. On those shifts, he was in charge of everything, every department on that shift. They had a quota to meet. Company policy just said they had to meet that quota, nothing else. So Dad would push the workers to finish that quota as fast as they could. After that, they would sit in the break room and play cards the rest of the night because the company policy was that they couldn't leave until the end of their shift, so they couldn't work, and they couldn't leave. Company policy also said that when an order was completed, they needed Dad's boss to sign off on another one. So really, there was nothing they could do. This could lead them to be sitting from anywhere from 2 to 6 hours on an 8-hour shift. Now Dad's boss, who I'll remind you was a college kid, caught on to this and dragged Dad in front of the plant manager and company owner. He was going to nail Dad to the wall. How dare he waste company time and money? He was stealing because he wasn't working. But Dad pointed out everything I listed. So while they didn't agree, there was nothing they could do because he followed company policy. So they tried that once you met your quota, you would no longer be paid but had to stay on site. The union got that thrown out before lunch, so they decided that Dad would have a quota, and if they finished a set of duties to perform, like clean up and getting things set for the morning shift, they just didn't realize that not every part of the factory finished at the same time, so it still ended up with a lot of downtime. Finally, they gave Dad the authorization to assign new order starts, so they had a quota. But if they finished early, Dad could assign another. If they finished that early, another one. But they only had to finish the first quota. Meaning if they were on their 3rd quota at shift end, but hadn't completed it, then they were okay. That ended it. People weren't happy, but hey, policy is policy.